by welcoming you to the technical forum here at the group exhibit Hydrogen and Fuel Cells 213. We invite you to have a seat, to have a free drink of the house. We will continue now our program with the second part from the European Day under the topic Infrastructure Built Up. Please give a big hand for the moderator of this panel discussion, the chair of the state representative group, Fuel Cells and Hydrogen Gen Undertaking, Mr. Bernard Froisse.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll shake hands. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for being here. I see a lot of interest. We have 4 distinguished speakers that I would like to introduce. Ladies first, Madame Julien, Marianne Julien, who represent really French associations and also has really, I would say, another hat, which is an important person from Air Liquide. Denis is really, I say Denis because we're good friends, and in some sense, he's somebody from a small company that really aims at being a big company in fuel cell, and already they're on track. So Denis is from UK. Klaus is the important person really in Germany about fuel cell. He's managing the national program, and as such, it's a very successful program. He has a lot of information to give you about how to get things along. And finally, we have Ulrich. Uli is somebody special because I've known him for 10 years. He's from the prestigious München Institute, who has an overview on really the problem from an economics, financing and deployment program. So I think we'll have really a very distinguished panel. We'll start by saying that we are, from the European point of view, very happy to be with you today, because we want to tell you that Europe is worrying about really industry, and especially industry in Germany. This is a fair that is worldwide known and where we can meet. And this is a special place because hydrogen and fuel cell here are really a topic of, I would say, continuous interest. So first, I would like to ask you a question to the 4 of you. You know, Europe has been proposing a directive to facilitate the deployment of hydrogen, and this directive is really, for the moment, just a proposal, but it's a mandate to governments to really build up infrastructure. And since all of you have really important responsibility, whether with your company, with your government, how do you feel about that? Marianne first.
You know, when we talk to people about hydrogen cars and hydrogen electric cars, they would say, oh yeah, that's great, I want one, how much it costs? And by the way, where's the station next to my home? And they want not only one station, they want 2 stations. One for, in case the other one is closed. And there we are in the chicken and egg problem that we all know for innovation, where you at the same time you need an equipment and an infrastructure. And this directive that has been proposed by the EU Commission for signature by the Parliament and the Congress is for France an extremely good news, because it's a strong movement from a political, at the political level to say, okay, let's go out of this chicken and egg problem. Let's take our responsibility as politicians to really drive this innovation and ensure that the citizens in the European countries have the choice between different options. Either they buy an electric car with a battery and they do a small urban movements, or they prefer an electric car with hydrogen to go longer distance. Or maybe they just decide to buy a very efficient ICE combustion engine car because this is what they want, but at least they have the choice. And I think freedom is great.
Well, keep it. We have enough microphones for everybody. So I will go next to Germany, because France and Germany, it's always interesting, because in some sense we have been partners really for a long time. And how do you see, Klaus, from your point of view, this directive?
I think it's quite remarkable, the proposal that the Commission is making. First of all, I believe the understanding more and more is that sustainable mobility without hydrogen will not happen. We will need hydrogen as an alternative fuel to reach our long-term targets for mobility. And this really is the assessment of the Commission then as well. The Commission says if we talk about alternative fuels for mobility, we're talking about electrical power, natural gas, LNG and hydrogen. So really in this official document it stated, hey, we need hydrogen. The other analysis is that most likely we will not see the infrastructure for these alternative fuels come into the market in a business as usual scenario. So it clearly states that in order to get these necessary fuels, we need public support. And the Commission in the end says, this is why we need to mandate building up the infrastructure, and we need the member states to, starting today, make up their plans and think about how they can set up infrastructure for alternative fuels. And then they go into some details, talking about hydrogen. The European idea is to make sure that if a customer decides to buy a fuel cell vehicle, that he can travel with that vehicle across Europe. So transnational mobility is basically the political motivation from a Commission point of view. Now in Germany, we have since quite a while some activities to develop these markets. We're working heavily not only on R&D but also on market preparation for fuel cell vehicles and the infrastructure that goes along with that. Including also then the question, where does the hydrogen come from? Because in the end it will have to come from renewables. Also this directive only looks at the stations, but then we need to look into the production pathways as well, but that's a separate story. So in Germany we've decided to build 50 stations until 2015. That's part of an R&D program that is ongoing. Our assumption is that based on those 50 stations, the industry will continue to build more stations to then commercially operate a hydrogen infrastructure. Because if you do the analysis, you find that operating a hydrogen infrastructure can be a profitable business. The risk is in the first years where you have not enough vehicles to utilize the stations heavily enough. But once you get into a mature market situation, all the analyses show that hydrogen from renewable energy can be sold with a profit at stations, including the investment into the stations, and that's exactly the situation that we will need. So we're happy with the proposal, but we have a political debate, of course, because this is fundamentally changing the way the Commission, but then also Germany, would go along with these things. It's a mandate in the end. We all understand that one of the main drivers for hydrogen fuel cells in the 1990s was the zero-emission mandate, zero-emission vehicle mandate in California. Now this for the first time is that Europe says we need to do something, we have a responsibility, and we need to make sure we get there. So interesting discussion coming up, but I hope that we get to the point that we get this approved by everybody, because we need this as a basis.
Dennis, you know, you're coming from the UK, and the UK is seen by many people in Europe as an island. I don't think it's true. Why in this game, you know, what is your interest really in developing your relation within a European framework, and how do you perceive this directive? Will it be a help for your company, for the UK? How do you fit in? Because for Klaus it's easy, he's in the center part of Germany. For you it's a little bit, we have to cross the channel. Okay, but since you are in China, in many places, I think you don't have a problem with that, right?
That's right, and in many respects, being an island can actually be an advantage. But go back to the basic point, the transition of the technology from technology readiness to market readiness is fundamentally around infrastructure. It is not necessarily around more of the technology. It's the infrastructure that enables the market transition to be able to get it out into user hands in a way that there are no barriers to acceptability, no barriers, no perceptions, because there's still a lot of perceptional issues about hydrogen and hydrogen-related technologies. This is one of the means, and it's a visionary means. It's a practical foresight that says, at the very, very minimum, you must start addressing the infrastructure question from the ground up, creating networks, creating capability, creating initial response to the potential to achieve the rollout. The UK actually acknowledges in the same way that you won't do it just by getting the pressure of having the vehicles available, because the vehicles won't be available because the hydrogen infrastructure is not available. So therefore, UK H2 Mobility program that has combined industry, vehicle OEMs, government, critically and importantly, government, to understand what the barriers are, create a vision, and start towards creating the network of capabilities that allow us to transition within the UK marketplace to 2020, 30, and achieve carbon reduction targets for the transportation fleet, and knowing that we can't do that just as an island, because of course it is a network, it's a network capability. That's why this particular directive and this approach is so critical. It is not just the UK. We've got our own issues to resolve internally, but you've got to do it on a network basis.
Well, this is very comforting, because I see that really the response from 3 countries that have important program is really that this is welcome. It's an initiative that will trigger probably some question, as you said, with this mandate question, but at least this is a positive move. Uli is coming from the LBST Institute, who has been long working on analysis of the situation at each stage. And I asked him, really, since he has been really involved with many projects, to tell us really a little bit an overview from an institute, from all that has been done in the last 10 years, to take us in a vision for the next years to come, and how he sees that. I know it's a difficult question, but I think you're up to, right?
No problem, I think, to answer that question. We have carried out quite a number of European activities, so I should represent here the European perspective in that. And in fact, the answer is there are 2 hearts beating in my breast, the one of a German and the one of a European citizen. So the German would say, well, 77 fueling stations, and this is what we are talking about in the European directive. This is simply not enough, given that we have just heard it, 50 fueling stations, hydrogen fueling stations in Germany by 2015, maybe even with a perspective to 100 fueling stations. And then activities or planned strategies in Scandinavia, in the UK, also in France, maybe in Italy, and so forth. So we would easily surpass these 77 fueling stations. That is my German perspective. The European perspective, of course, and this is kind of the more important part of my answer here, is it is a very important and vital sign that hydrogen refueling infrastructure, the acceptance of fuel cell vehicles, has arrived at the European level. Knowing that among those 27 member states, of course, there are some which are heavily opposing to build up that type of infrastructure, because they are just simply not hydrogen and fuel cell development activities in all the member states. We have to understand and accept that at European level, this is the way of starting and kicking off this type of activity. You cannot do it at the same level in all member states. So it's a perfect European approach. It's a perfect answer. Yeah, and a perfect start, let's put it like that. But again, from a German perspective, we could do much better. We have done better. We have the strategies. We have the partners, those who are already backing the development. We need to transfer that to a European level.
Well, thank you very much. After this first round of questions, you know, we are in, I would say, reasonable optimism, because we see that we have a technology, we have really ideas how to deploy it, we have ideas to make it less costly, because this is a question, who can buy it? The problem is the following. I think industry today knows how to reduce cost if there is a consensus that this is the way to go. And this is where Europe, as you say, has a specific role to play, to encourage all governments. And I think that this will go at a certain pace. We want to accelerate it. This is a goal. But before we continue, I would like in the audience, first one thing. Be kind to me, ask questions to any speakers stopping me. You just hand waving like that. I have my wonderful consultant who knows about everything, but has tricky questions. And I would like to encourage you to have whatever is the question, ask it, okay? You know, in an American medium, people, you know, a student will stop you and say, I don't understand what you say. The question is, it's a touchy subject where you have here 4 experts that can really give you answers that are very sincere and that can tell you where we're going. So, you know, I welcome all your questions, especially you, Ulrich. Absolutely.
Thank you. May I take the first question? I'm very interested because I speak with a lot of people from the automotive industry also. I'm a moderator and also do conferences there. And those people, decision makers, engineers, are telling me fuel cells is very interesting, but we won't see it because we are very well aware about the 95 gram CO2 per kilometer, per 100 kilometer. We are also ready to meet 70 gram CO2 per 100 kilometer. And we can all do this with hybrid vehicles, no problem. Internal combustion engines who are downsized, who are, better, much better made. We have a lot of things in the pipeline. We can reach that with quite normal internal combustion engines. If they say it, are they all wrong? Yeah? Or are you wrong? I don't know. I really don't know. So I would like to put that question to you.
I have a simple answer to that. History will tell. But I can tell you how we're going to work on that. Who wants to answer first?
There's no absolutely right or wrong answer. It's already been identified by the industry in the powertrain assessment that was undertaken 2.5 years ago now. There isn't a single silver bullet out there in terms of engine and powertrain technology that will, without any hesitation, achieve the 2030 and 2050 targets. It's around a portfolio of opportunities, a portfolio of technologies, and within that portfolio, fuel cell, hybrid, fuel cell electric vehicles as a powertrain capability will be the result that will achieve decarbonisation objectives, cost of motoring, achievement of all of the mobility requirements that we as individual consumers expect of the vehicles that we want, the ability to go long distances, carry the cargo, carry the family, whatever is needed across pretty well all of the vehicle segments. But it doesn't mean that there won't be internal combustion engine, low CO2 internal combustion engines in the mix, and it doesn't mean that there won't be battery electric technology in the mix. But they will have different ways and different pathways of transition to roll out and utilization. So I think that everybody is correct, but if the automotive companies were also convinced that it didn't need to go to the hybrids that you mentioned and other technologies, then the Toyotas, the Hondas, and those companies that have made the investments are moving forward with towards volume production and the introduction of fuel cell electric vehicles, then they've made the wrong choice. And I don't believe that is the case either.
The long-term target is zero-emission mobility. If you look at the political targets, minus 80% CO2 until 2050. Germany has taken a target of minus 40% on primary energy consumption in the mobility sector until 2050. That's different from the CO2, that's really on efficiency. To reach those targets, we need batteries and fuel cells, we need these kind of technologies. We know how to do it, the question is how fast do we want to do it? And then, of course, you have to look at the various dimensions in this. It's about climate policy, it's about energy policy, it's about industrial policy, and it's about social policy. Starting with social policy, how affordable is mobility in the future? How affordable will oil-based products be in the future? We don't know. Some people tell us we'll continue to have oil cheap and affordable for the next 20, 30, 40 years. Fine, let's not do anything. Others tell us, well, we should be more cautious about this and rather not spend all our money on importing oil, but rather use domestic energies to also power mobility. If you look at the energy policy dimension of this, increasing the share of renewables will require storage. Large-scale storage is hydrogen. So all of a sudden we will have a renewably produced hydrogen in future. So why not use it as a fuel in the transportation sector, since the transportation sector inherently is one that is willing to pay more for power than the regular power sector. And I could go on with all these kind of things. From an automotive standpoint, 95 grams CO2 per kilometer in 2020, that is achievable by improving incumbent technologies, including hybridization, which is the first step towards the electrification of the drivetrain. So why then stop halfway? Why not continue? Why not move further? If we then discuss whatever the figures will be, 70 grams in 2025, 50 grams in 2030, you will reach a point where the industry knows we will not get to that target without batteries and fuel cells. So why not start as early as today, which the OEMs are doing? Why not invest into the future also to be competitive on a global scale? If you look at the automotive system, this is heavily driven by competition. So you have to be on the top of the innovation, and I think that's another good argument why hydrogen and fuel cells make sense for the OEMs.
Okay, Marianne?
Yeah. It's a great challenge for OEMs to make their choice between all these possible technologies, and they are usually not specialists about the energy and the energy systems in front of this automotive. So when I discovered that business, I had lots of compassion for the OEMs that need to find their ways into that route. I just want to share an experience. In France, at the moment, we have 10,000 electric battery vehicles on the road. Okay, this was forcefully supported by the French government. And so people are discovering electric driving, and they love it, because electric driving is really different from combustion engine driving. It's less noise, and it's less vibration, and it's a nice acceleration when you start the car. So when they see the limit in battery electric vehicle, because then you have autonomy limit, they don't come back to ICE, they don't come back to combustion engine, they are asking for fuel cell. And this is a great opening. And I think electric driving is really different from combustion engine driving. And this is a driver. I think the customers are going to make the choice at the end. Of course, providing they have the stations to fit in their car.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think, again, it's my task here to be the visionary now. I would like to ask you or to encourage you for a little exercise. A couple of years ago, we did a European-based project with 10 member states, and we went out to all those member states, talked to them, both in the west, in the north, in the east, in the south. And we asked them, what is your vision concerning hydrogen, the role of hydrogen? This was very much more focused on transport in the beginning, then also on stationary a little bit. So we did it the wrong way in the beginning, because we said, okay, starting from today, what is the way into the future? And everybody started saying, yeah, today we have oil, and I cannot really imagine that to change very much. Yeah. We changed the whole approach after maybe 50% of the project had gone. We went back to the member state and said, how do you envision 2050 it's going to look like, without thinking of today? And the answers were completely different. It was like, yeah, okay, then of course everything will be renewable. So this exercise needs to be done in parallel. We first need to do that foresight, that perfect foresight, so to speak, and then consider how to get there from today. So this is a completely different approach. And if you play that a little bit further, well, do that exercise for yourself, by the way. If you drive that a little bit further, you suddenly find out we have not really engaged into looking into all the different options. Just these days, we had a very interesting debate with groups, farmers in Germany, who suddenly find out they have so much PV capacity being installed. This goes into the grid, and the grid is not capable of swallowing that electricity. In combination with wind energy, and then put that into hydrogen, or convert that into hydrogen, you have the perfect fuel, not only for the transport sector, maybe also for the machinery. And looking at farming equipment, think a little bit about that. You find out this is the perfect technical solution, not only environmental perfect solution, but also a perfect technical solution. Flexible, high torque, and many different drive systems across a farming machine. So we have not engaged into that. And maybe a final remark, if that is allowed. We have these discussions in Germany after Energiewende. Okay, natural gas industry, they would like to help storing fluctuating renewable energy or electricity specifically. How to do that? And we have the ongoing discussion. It is either admixture to natural gas or it's methanization and take it as 100% natural gas. But there is a third solution. The third solution is take parts of the natural gas grid, convert that to 100% hydrogen, add a fueling station to that site, and then you don't have a fueling station but an energy station. So this is kind of starting from the roots, starting from down below and grow into bigger systems. So there are always options, different options, and maybe those which we have not really engaged into. We are just starting out concerning the infrastructure build-up. This is the topic we are talking about here. But this, I think, should be my part to contribute to encourage you to think further than we are thinking today.
Yes, because at the end, what is important is the customer. Why somebody will be interested in hydrogen? Well, 10 years ago, CO2 was a big debate. We wanted really to decarbonize energy. Today we have discovered that hydrogen is something bigger than that. It's, for example, it's something where you can do something about electric vehicles. For example, if I take Japan, and I will take back what Dennis said, you know, Toyota had a vision. Long time ago, they want to please the customer. And their approach was, we have to go to the electrification of the vehicle. That was one thing. Then, first step, they said hybrid. And remember, when the first hybrid vehicle came, at least in France, I can guarantee you that it was what we call un fou rire, you know, collective laughter. Everybody was laughing. Hybrid cars, are you silly? And in places where it was just based on customer approach, like for example in Vancouver, all the taxi drivers used hybrid vehicle. They loved it. They buy one and they buy a second one. Okay, we have what I would call the Apple effect. You know, Steve Jobs. You create a need that people have inside themselves, but they don't know because they don't know it exists. Okay, so Toyota went along, and they realized that in Japan the hybrid car has no future because the hybrid car has a range which is not ideal for Japanese. Japanese use their car for the weekend, and immediately they thought that the customer in Japan, ultimately, we don't know when, will like to have hydrogen car. And so Toyota is an example of continuity, and where suddenly customers are appearing that didn't exist. Okay. So the question for us is, what do we do in Europe in terms of action? And I think this is really going to be our next stage. What do we do towards the customer. Because the customer, after all, is the one that will like or will not like something. And the question is, once a customer likes something, like for example, a telephone company, and I won't say Samsung, Nokia or whatever, but usually the second one he buys is from the same company. Why? Because he has developed a relationship. And I think that it's very important to see for people that are industry-driven and wants to make money for a good cause, the customer is a goal. So now this is going to be my next round of questions. How do we address the customer and how can we involve him in the discussion? Because we're doing nice things for him that he has to appreciate. So this is something important. So whoever wants to start. Klaus.
Well, the customer, at least talking about the general German perspective, likes to be green, but I'm not sure he's willing to spend more on being green. Just recently we've done a survey on that was hydrogen specific. We were asking about the general perception on hydrogen in regards to safety. People were quite confident. So questions were, would you mind having a hydrogen station in your neighborhood where today you have a regular gas station? No. We kind of, trust technically that these things are working well. So safety does not really seem to be an issue, at least for the German perspective. We were asking the same question for the vehicles. Do you believe that fuel cell vehicles are safe? Yes, the vast majority said yes, we believe they're safe. So yes, in Germany we have some kind of a belief in the engineering capabilities that we have in Germany, but I think that's a good starting point. So at least the customer is not scared. But we also asked, are you willing to pay more for an innovative vehicle? A little bit, yes. But if it goes to 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 euros more per vehicle, you end up with a fairly small share of people that are willing to spend that much more. Of course, this comes from any buying decision for a vehicle today. You buy a gasoline or a diesel vehicle may cost 2,000 to 3,000 euros more. So that price tag is something people can imagine, and they kind of calculate the advantages or sometimes just emotions, and they say, okay, 3,000 more, I'll do it, I buy it. But there's a limit to this. One thing where we are also is that the customer is confused. Because the customer, if you ask regular people on the street, I'm not sure you would get a clear answer of how a battery vehicle, a fuel cell vehicle, a hybrid vehicle, a plug-in hybrid vehicle, a diesel vehicle, a gasoline vehicle, a whatever vehicle are different one from the other. They all know we need to be greener. They all understand we need to find alternatives to oil. But we don't have to assume that there's a detailed technical understanding of all the things we're discussing. And I'm not saying we need customers to understand the technology in detail, but we need them to get to a point where they can take a decision that they're comfortable in buying new technology that indeed doesn't have to be much more expensive than incumbent technologies. Because innovative technologies in the beginning are inherently more expensive. And this also includes the infrastructure. We have to find a way to, in public-private partnership, develop these things further and get volumes into the market. In the end, we are talking about a mass volume phenomena that we need to get to. And in these mass market conditions, I'm very sure that selling hydrogen and selling fuel cell vehicles is a commercial, profitable business for the industry.
Thank you very much. I have two questions, one here, one here. This one first. Denny, go ahead. We'll give you a priority.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to emphasize that within the UK, in order to try and build a vision of what customers are looking for, what perspectives you need to take to build the roadmap for the technology rollout, a lot of work was done with customers. And simply, there are customers and there are customers. There are lots of customer segments, and the diversity of opinion varies very significantly in terms of whether it's industry side, so business buying versus consumer buying. And we spent a lot of time working through understanding what the perceptions were, what the willingness to pay was, in relation to vehicle attributes, vehicle cost, and so on, to be able to come up with a very, very clear degree and a very strong certainty that, yes, there are customers that do take the approach that they are prepared to pay for that new technology. There are always those that want to be the first green adopter, the achiever, the one to have the vehicle parked on their driveway that says, yeah, I understand this is a new technology, it has some challenges, but hey, I'm up for those challenges. So you don't do that easily by standing on the other side. You need to get involved with the customers. We've started that process in the UK, and we'll continue that. We must continue that in order to be able to move it on. But just that point, on the business side, it's absolutely fixed, firm, and dominant. It's down to pennies, pounds, euros, whatever the cost structure is, that will make that decision. So we are not expecting business customers, unless they're fleet users, to be the early adopters. They'll be private consumers. Sorry, I just wanted to get that point across. Thank you.
Question.
I just wanted to amplify what Klaus had said, and that is the biggest challenge has already been overcome. And what I mean by that is that a fuel cell hydrogen electric vehicle is the only zero-emission vehicle right now, and for the very near-term foreseeable future, that totally replicates the current driver's experience of being able to drive 300 to 500 miles and fill that vehicle up in 2, 3, 5 minutes. That is the key component that will promote the acceptability with consumers. The initial success of hybrids was that it didn't take the consumer outside his comfort zone. They were filling the vehicle. The hybrid system was basically very passive as far as the consumer was concerned. They didn't have to do anything more than they normally did from their current driving experience to what they had to do in a hybrid. And that's the key advantage, I think, that the car companies are seeing in the future of fuel cell electric vehicles, is that it gives them the pathway to have a zero-emission vehicle that a customer can go from an internal combustion engine right to a zero-emission vehicle engine. So I just want to amplify what you were discussing.
Okay, next.
Thank you very much. Similar to this question from the speaker, I think there was one point that you omitted when you were saying about the customer's acceptance. Yes, you can get the customers to pay a bit extra, 10 or 20% extra without any problem. What you've got to avoid, and that's a mistake which was made on the electrical vehicles, you can't expect the customer to make a compromise in their current level of mobility. In electric vehicles, apart from the cost, the issue was the driving range. In hydrogen, as you said, that's very close to the current level of mobility, but what will restrict it is the lack of infrastructure.
Thank you.
Well, it doesn't perfectly fit to the last question, but I would like to say something on behalf of the H2Move Scandinavia project, which was the first LiDARs project of FCH.JU, and report a little bit about our learnings from talking to the people. So we really try to get people driving the vehicles and collect also their opinion. And it was very interesting, a couple of observations there. First observation was, well, we're always obsessed of safety. Is hydrogen safe? Are fuel cell vehicles safe? And let people sit in the cars, drive the cars, they immediately forget about it's hydrogen on board, it's just fun to drive. And that was taken up, Dennis, you might recall we had this event in London, and Kit Malthouse, the deputy mayor of the city of London, said, don't sell those vehicles just on rational reasons. It's fun to drive as well. It is not only something which you have to pay for at each corner, so to speak, but it's a normal vehicle. Start selling those vehicles also on emotional reasons, like we do with normal cars today. This was his message, so to speak. And finally, we did not really pick up any negative opinion from anyone driving the cars, neither in Oslo, where most of the cars were driving all the time, nor in Copenhagen, nor through our European road tour, which we organized 4 weeks last September and October. So we were welcomed by many people saying, well, we just didn't know. So my message here is a very key message also to FCHU in the program. We have to improve the way of communicating. If you go out to people, everybody knows what a battery electric vehicle is, but very few people know the advantages of fuel cell vehicles. It's electric driving, maybe it's what we dubbed the better electromobility. I think we should get that message out to the people with expectation management when they can buy the cars for the first time and at what price.
Marianne.
So I fully agree with everything that has been said so far. So if the vehicle is very similar to a long-range vehicle as we know today, then the question remains, and we come back to the initial question, is there a station next to my home? And I want to share an experience because I have no solution yet, but in France at the moment and on Friday, we have a meeting with key regions that are where we invite a politician representative of those regions that they are very fond of hydrogen because for them it's a way to use the local energy that they produce either through a conventional plant or through a renewable, and they can use that energy and instead of selling it back through the grid, use it for the vehicle of their citizen in their region. There is this local, suddenly this local feeling about energy, and so what we're trying to do in France is try to spot and to define who are going to be the champion regions where we can build maybe 3, 5, 10 stations and communicate to the customers and try to start with those hotspots and then maybe spread all over the country. And I think it's been the same in Germany and UK.
Thank you very much. So we are addressing, yes, you have a question?
Okay, thanks. One question. We talk very much about the drivers, but I want to talk about the technology. We know that today we have two main technology, battery electrical cars and fuel cell cars. But do you think that these two technologies are in competition, and one perhaps in a few time investors have to make a choice? For example, for infrastructures, for reloading stations, they have to make a choice in investing in electrical cars or in fuel cell cars.
I will be the first one to answer to that question. In my world, we don't see any competition. Each one of them has its range of interest. If you're staying locally, for example, within Paris, electric vehicles are fine. There is no need, really, for hydrogen. It's going to be a question of cost. It's going to be a question of local investment interest. But so, if range is no issue, there is no problem, okay? If range becomes an issue, and I don't know if you have an idea of what was the situation, for example, in Paris this year, but suddenly Paris was very cold, very snowy, and what we found out is first that really the range of, I would say, 30 to 40 kilometers was about 5 kilometers. Why? Because you had windshield wipers, you had electric heating. For example, if you have a comfortable car, you have seat heating. No, it's very cold and people, okay? You have, of course, your lights on because you're starting in the morning. And the range, the absolute range, was 5 to 7 kilometers. So a lot of people were surprised because their car suddenly couldn't take them back home. So I think in the future it's going to improve. But no matter how it will improve, the fuel cell comes back as something which can be just, for example, for the beginning, a range extender. You know, we don't talk about so much technology, but a range extender is something that people know how to do, and that could be a transition. Because we don't talk in this panel about transitions, but we have this problem of really going to the future with different pathways. Okay, so what I'm saying is we see that electric car is the future. Electric. The vehicle will be different. Okay, for example, we hope it will drive itself when people are a little bit dizzy, okay, or they have a heart attack. So we're talking about something which is almost immediate. So here you have room for batteries, you have room, and that's what the German program is. Battery program, fuel cell program. History will tell, okay? So we don't know. But at this moment, there is absolutely no issue about competitiveness. It's choices. Renault loves batteries, okay? Other people love fuel cell cars. What can I tell? Now,
it's difficult for an investor to decide where to put his money, of course. Yes, I fully agree with Bernard, there is no competition. Any fuel cell vehicle is a hybridized vehicle and needs a high power, high performance battery. So batteries and fuel cells are key components of any future sustainable mobility. Not only in passenger cars, and that's the discussion we had here primarily, but also in other fields of mobility. I'm not sure every investor is happy that invested 2-3 years ago into the production facilities of lithium-ion batteries. Because today we see that the capacity, the production capacity is twice as high as the market demand. So there will be investments that are not paying off. If you take a decision as an investor, you want to understand how you can get a return on investment in a short period of time. And that's exactly the challenge we're facing. And that's why I was saying early on, in a business as usual environment, you will hardly see investments in either batteries or hydrogen and fuel cells. You then need to look into the business case. We're discussing that we have a program on what we call model regions on battery electric mobility. We're looking into infrastructure build-up, recharging points for battery vehicles. The investment per spot is not that high, depending on the technology, anywhere from 2,000 to maybe 10,000 euro. But the amount of kilowatt hours you're selling with this specific spot is not very high either. So it's hard to find a business case to justify the investment into the hardware of a recharging infrastructure. So you will have to be flexible to find other ways to motivate consumers to go there, not only buy your electricity, but maybe do another business along with that. So these kind of flexible business models need to be found. I'm not sure somebody has found that silver bullet. That's completely different with hydrogen technology. Hydrogen infrastructure offers a profitable business case with the challenge that it's only long-term profitable, and the first 5 years, maybe the first 7 years, will not be profitable. And that's exactly the challenge that we have to overcome, and that's where we need the regulatory framework, where we need stable political decisions. And coming back to the original point, that's why we need not only the European Commission, not only Europe, but the member states, the governments in member states, all the way down to the states, the communities. They need to be, they need to understand we need this, and they need to be confident that this will come. Otherwise, we will not see those investments.
We have one question here. Yes.
Klaas Palmberg from company Voikoski.
We have 5 minutes to conclude.
And I think we are all convinced about the hydrogen car. But I just would like to point out that hydrogen is a much, much bigger deal. Hydrogen is actually, it's just an energy carrier in the same kind as electrons or in hydrocarbons. But it's a much more clever energy carrier than, let's say, electrons. Just transporting electrons in cables are much, much more expensive than transporting hydrogen in pipelines. And partly those pipelines are already there. Frequently people talk about, so even some of you mentioned that cars using methane or natural gas. was kind of a solution. It's not. It's still a hydrocarbon. It's same kind as oil. So the only clever energy carrier, better than electrons, is hydrogen. So it could be used for a lot more application than just cars. But those applications, of course, will accelerate the use in cars. Hydrocarbons like oil can be used for much more clever things than just burning them. They can be produce plastic or whatever. So I want to say is hydrogen is a real big thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hold on. I would like to present really the person who is speaking, because he's from a Finnish company that actually produces hydrogen. So he has a direct impact really on the field because it is his bet. And this is interesting because we have here people who have bet on something. He's one of them. Thank you very much for your comment.
Sorry, one comment more and I'll stop talking. But we are very convinced about hydrogen because you are talking about renewable production of hydrogen, but there are already now enormous amount of byproduct hydrogen which is just let up into the air. That could be recovered and used.
Thank you.
If I may...
quick, we want to finish in less than 5 minutes.
I would like to repeat what I said before. We should venture our brains into the future. We should not only look at the way forward, but what is dragging us to the transition phase, so to speak. And of course, given the availability of energy in the future, energy resources, primary energy, oil, gas, maybe nuclear energy, renewable energy. We all know it's going to be renewable energy mostly, which we will end up with. So that leads us to electrons on one side, but we need a chemical form of storing energy. And the perfect, and again, you said it, the perfect match is with hydrogen through fuel cells and electrolysis. Large-scale storage, as we have heard. So looking into natural gas, yes, it can be something for the transition phase, like with CNG or LNG vehicles, maybe ships and airplanes and so forth. Then concerning the infrastructure, looking into electrons, I didn't mean to say, okay, battery electric vehicles, we don't need them by saying, battery electromobility. But for certain purposes, yes, it is. But we should see that the market, well, not niche, but application for each type of technology. So,
yes.
But look into the future, free your minds of too much thinking about today.
So, Marianne and Dennis, I would like you to conclude. Marianne first, you, Dennis, have the last word.
Just a quick conclusion. I very much agree with what you just said. In France, at the moment, we have approximately a few 100,000 people who understand something about electricity. They are competent, they know how it works, they know how to plug an appliance, and they are comfortable. We probably have something like 50,000 people with capabilities natural gas handling. But in hydrogen, it's very few people. So there is a training challenge. And if there are professors in this room or maybe parents, please push your children into the understanding something about gas and about hydrogen, because this is a future. But there is a huge training effort to be delivered.
Dennis?
Thank you. Just picking up on the point, you've made a convincing case as to why hydrogen, why fuel cell electric vehicles, but the wider economic picture, certainly at the macroeconomic level at the likes of the United Kingdom, is also local production capability. So there's a balance of payment, there's a GDP, there's an economic impact, and a further case for using hydrogen as a transportation fuel. That also, when hydrogen is used as a transportation fuel, there's the health effects, so no emissions, no NOx, and so on. So with all of the particulate matter from the transition to use of diesel, that goes away, health benefits, thousands of directly attributable deaths avoided by transitioning to hydrogen. It's not just about the technology.
by itself. It's around the network of additional advantages that are achieved as a consequence of that transition.
Thank you, Dennis. Klaus.
Just coming back to the original title of the session, infrastructure build-up. What we've primarily discussed is fuel infrastructure. What we should discuss is energy infrastructure. We tend to discuss mobility solutions here, power solutions there, heat solutions here, and our regulatory framework is exactly in that. We have mandates or whatever for the OEMs, we have for the power sector something. No, we need to think this as a complete system, combining transportation, the power sector, the heat sector, and hydrogen really is the link to do this. So let's all take our efforts to build that energy infrastructure. Thank you.
Well, and thank you for the Hannover Messe to have given us this opportunity to explain to you that after all it's a European problem and it's probably a world problem. So thank you for all your patience staying there, and I would like to thank all these speakers that I thought gave you a very fine view, very subtle view of the problem. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, all you guys, for being here for this very, very interesting panel discussion. After a break of nearly 1 hour, we continue here our program through the European Day with this third part. Thank you for being here, for coming back.